Good evening, everyone. I'm Laura Cronk, Director of the Creative Writing Program here at the New School, and I'm very pleased to be welcoming you here tonight. We're thrilled to be partnering with PEN America and the Academy of American Poets to bring two of our moment's most visionary poets together in conversation. We're especially happy to host this event during our centennial year. Throughout 2019, all of us in the Creative Writing Program and at the New School will be thinking deeply about lineage, about the role of the artist in the intellectual life of our culture, and about how we can intensify and expand our work and our connections to each other. I just want to say a few words about our centennial. In 1919, 100 years ago, the New School unveiled a new educational model based on open discussion of ideas and the issues that shape civic life. The New School opened its doors to asylum seekers and refugee scholars, artists, and others who sought an intellectual home that allowed them to fully articulate their opposition to fascism. Protecting academic freedom and freedom of expression has always been central to who we are. During our centennial year, we celebrate the expansive range of the work that has come out of the New School, and we look forward to what's to come. On that note, we would like to invite you all to campus during the first week of October, when we'll host a week-long festival, the Festival of New. The New School's been a home to writers from the very beginning. We recently learned that writers came together using the workshop model here as early as 1920. Our community now includes a nationally recognized MFA program, an undergraduate creative writing major, an undergraduate honors program, summer programs in writing and publishing, and if you'd like any information about those programs, please visit newschool.edu/writing. Our community also includes everyone who comes together for events like this one, events that bring writers into conversation with each other. All of you here tonight and everyone joining us via live stream, we welcome you and we hope you know you're always welcome here. Thank you again for joining us tonight. I'll now turn the program over to Gregory Partlow, the incredible poet, Pulitzer Prize winner, and PEN America trustee.
Thanks, Laura. Good evening, everyone. Yes, I'm Gregory Partlow from PEN America Center. Our event tonight, as Laura mentioned, is in partnership not only with the New School, but also with the Academy of American Poets. We are all institutions very much committed to championing the cause of writers everywhere. PEN fights tirelessly to promote literacy and the right to debate, question, dispute, and verify language used by those empowered by governments to shape the experiences that everyday people like us have. PEN America also confers over 20 distinct awards, fellowships, grants, and prizes each year, awarding nearly $370,000 to writers and translators. Just earlier this week, we had the PEN American Literary Awards. Since 1963, PEN's been honoring writers with these awards, which have gone to illustrious folk like our guests tonight. Layli Long Soldier won the PEN Gene Stein Award in 2018, a prize that this year, if you didn't notice, went to Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah for his collection of short stories, Friday Black, which my students think I'm clairvoyant because at the beginning of the semester I swapped it into our reading list. So I was thrilled to see that book do so well. And of course, Claudia Rankine won the PEN Open Book Award in 2015 for her once-in-a-generation book, Citizen. Another plug, my tennis partner, Rowan Ricardo Phillips, won for literary sports writing for his book, The Circuit. It is, of course, my very distinct honor to introduce our friends Layli Long Soldier and Claudia Rankine. Layli Long Soldier holds a BFA from the Institute of American Indian Arts and an MFA from Bard College. She's the recipient of an NACF National Artist Fellowship, a Lannan Literary Fellowship, a Whiting Award, and she was a finalist for the 2017 National Book Award. As I mentioned, she received the 2018 Penn Gene Stein Award and also the 2018 National Book Critics Circle Award. She's the author of the chapbook Chromosomery and, from 2010, and Whereas, as you know. She lives in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Our good friend Claudia Rankine is the author of 5 collections of poetry, including Citizen and American Lyric, Don't Let Me Be Lonely, 2 plays, including The White Card, which premiered in February of 2018 and will be published by Grey Wolf in 2019, and Provenance of Beauty, a South Bronx travelogue, as well as numerous video collaborations. She's also the editor of several anthologies, including The Racial Imaginary, Writers on Race in the Life of the Mind. In 2016, she co-founded the Racial Imaginary Institute. I'm sure many of you have attended those amazing events. Among her numerous awards and honors, Rankine is the recipient of the Bobbitt National Prize for Poetry, the Poets and Writers Jackson Poetry Prize, and fellowships from the Guggenheim, Lannan Foundation, MacArthur Foundation, the United States Artists, and the National Endowment for the Arts. She's a chancellor of the Academy of American Poets and teaches at Yale University as the Frederick Eisman Professor of Poetry, and she lives in New Haven, Connecticut. And finally, we at Penn encourage you to join us in taking a moment now and at future gatherings like this to pay our respects to the Lenape people, past, present, and future, and acknowledge that we are gathered on their land this evening. Thank you. Claudia and Layli, I present. Sorry.
Is it morning? No. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. In order to see you, but mostly to speak with Layla. I teach her work. I love her work. I think about her work. I walk with her work. You know what I mean by that? It stays with you. You carry it. You turn it over, it becomes the object and the event. And this is the first time I've met her, so it seems very strange to have lived with her, and only now to meet her. It's an honor to be here on behalf of Penn, which does such great work in the world. I'm going to read, I had a genre anxiety moment, because I thought, whereas I should read some poetry, whereas I should, but I don't have any, so I'm not reading any. Finally the reality just hits you. So I'm going to read from the manuscript of the book I'm working on now, called Just Us, and it's a book about conversation, and part of its ambition is to psychoanalyze conversations that have to do with, should I say it, whiteness. Thinking about race, thinking about how whiteness functions, thinking about our structures that made us, whether or not we acknowledge them. So I'm going to read briefly. It's not the whole piece, because, like you, I'm waiting to hear the person I came here to hear. I will read only a page and a half. I go to a play with a white female friend. She's interested in thinking about whiteness. This play is interested in thinking about race. We are covered in all directions. Near the end of the play, the fourth wall is broken. A character asks the white people in the audience to get up from their seats and walk onto the stage. The stage is set up as a living and dining room. Faces will be revealed, composure tested. Effort must be made to stay within the requests of the play. The Black actor wishes the space of the audience to hold Black people in a way the world does not. The request is presented as a conditional. What if? What if the audience, in the space of the imagination, can enact something that doesn't exist in the world? Is the stage now a segregated place? As the Black actors join the Blacks in the audience? Is center stage now the back of the bus? Or is it the whites-only boardroom? In the moment, no one knows what is really happening. A white man in the seat behind me says, "This is fucked up." Nonetheless, he makes his way to the stage. The white woman I am with remains in her seat. I'm getting tense. The playwright is a Black woman, and I am a Black woman, and I want her play to have what it has requested, what I assume it needs. This tension begins to couple with a building resentment against my friend. I feel betrayed by her, even though I am not the playwright. I am not the playwright. The playwright might think the success of the play depends on some white people staying in their seats. The playwright might be waiting for a Black person to get on the stage with the white people. None do. The playwright might want me to think her request is divisive and walk out of the theater. Not a Black stage, not a white stage, but a united stage kind of thing. The playwright might have calculated what percentage of the audience would act out. Are my unbearable feelings a sign that I, a Black member of the audience, am acting out? The playwright might think, why are they listening to me? As more and more white audience members fill up the stage and people of color stay seated. Will the stage hold all the white people? Or, and this is what is troubling me, the playwright might have said exactly what she wants to happen. I am trying to listen to the actor speak the closing lines of the play, which it turns out is comprised of quotes from famous Black writers, but all I can think about is my white friend's non-compliance present in the row behind me. Why won't she do what she was asked? I can't understand why she can't do such a simple thing. Why can't she see it matters? Does it matter? In the sense that race matters, her refusal feels like an insistence on full ownership of the entire theater. I'm beginning to feel pushed out of my own seat by her rejection of the requests that Black people own the space of the audience for the last minutes of the play. I am feeling crowded by her refusal, burdened by my association with it. Oh God, oh God, oh God. Taxi. I want to run. Away from what? My embodied refusal, I can't help but see. An embodied refusal I can't help but see, and that surprises me. My own mounting emotion in the face of her perceived belligerence, a friendship error despite my understanding of how whiteness functions. I thought we shared the same worldview, if not the same privileges. Be still, my beating, breaking heart. When the play finally ends, I say to my confounding friend, I didn't know you were black. She doesn't respond.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me? So, Layli Kichita Hanska, Layli Long Soldier, Imachiapi. I'm really happy to be here. And I am so honored to be invited. And I'm thankful to all of you for coming. Thank you. Whereas I heard a noise I thought was a sneeze. At the breakfast table, pushing eggs around my plate, I wondered if he liked my cooking. Thought about what to talk about. He pinched his fingers to the bridge of his nose and squeezed his eyes. He wiped. I often say he was a terrible drinker when I was a child. I'm not afraid to say it because he's different now. Sober, attentive, showered, eating. But in my childhood, when things were different, I rolled onto my side, my hands together as if to pray, locked between my knees. When things were different, I lay there for long hours, my face to the wall, blank. My eyes left me, my soldiers, my 2 scouts to the unseen. And because language is immaterial, I never could speak about the missing. So perhaps I cried for the invisible, what I could not see doubly. What is it to wish for the absence of nothing? There at the breakfast table as an adult, wondering what to talk about, if he liked my cooking, pushing the invisible to the plate's edge. I looked up to see he hadn't sneezed. He was crying. I'd never heard him cry, didn't recognize the symptoms. I turned to him when I heard him say, I'm sorry I wasn't there, sorry for many things. Like that curative voicing, an opened bundle, or medicine, or birthday wishing, my hand to his shoulder. It's okay, I said. It's over now. I meant it. Because of our faces blankly. Because of a lifelong stare down. Because of centuries in sorry. I commend this land and this land. Honor this land. Native this land. Peoples this land. For this land. This land. Thousands. This land. Of this land. Years. This land. That this land. They this land. Have this land. Stewarded this land. And this land protected this land, this land, this land, this land, this land, this land, this. Thank you.
So,
Oh, yes.
we're going to do a performance piece.
Okay, this is from section 4 of a poem titled Kassapa. But is the small way to begin.
But I could not.
as I am limited to few words at command, such as Wambli. This was how I wanted to begin, with the little I know.
But could not.
Because this Wambli, this eagle of my imagining, is not spotted, bald, nor even a nest eagle. It is gold, though by definition, not ever the great golden eagle, much as the gold, by no mistake, is not ground gold, mangold, or nugget. But here it is the gold of light and wing together. Wings that do not close, but in expanse, angle up so slightly, plunge with muscle and stout head somewhere between my uncle, son, father, brother.
But I failed to begin there with this expanse, much as I failed to start with the great point in question. There in muscle, in high inner flight, always. In the plunge, we fear for the falling. We buckle to wonder. What man is expendable? I wanted us to start there because I wanted us to begin with that question. What man is expendable? And the reason I'm interested in your relationship to that question, since you asked it, is it seems like there's so many men floating around this book. There's you, of course, but then there's Obama, and there's your dad, and that list of men, the uncle, and so and so. So I wondered if you could begin there.
So this is something that you mentioned just before we came out, and so I had a little time to think about it, which is great. So I actually have to laugh a little bit to myself, because for me, the recurrence of men in the book is actually, I would say, an intentional kind of nod towards the men in our community, men in my family. And it was something that I did consciously, I think, because I come from a matriarchal community. So in some ways, I take the idea of women in the role of leadership or power, the power of the women in our community. I kind of take that for granted. That's a car that I'm always driving anyway, right? In fact, I mean, honestly, there's, well, I won't go there. Anyway. And so I think maybe that was a way of me slowing down that car in certain moments to take also, as I already said, to kind of take a glance towards also the men in my family, and kind of a history also of expendability, which I think transcends just the men in our community, but also the women as well. But in that particular piece, that's what I was doing there.
And also the piece about your father.
Yeah.
The reason why I'm interested in this is because I'm thinking a lot about what constitutes the counter-narrative in a book like this. And so as you're working both with the documents and with the history that is as bloody as it is, how do you see that? Is it really the positioning of the book from another perspective, or is it an attempt to redress in the way the apology is a kind of redress?
I think that when I sat down to respond to this document, the congressional document, which of course is online if anyone's curious, if you want to read it. I think that what made the greatest impression on me in reading that congressional apology is that there were these huge swaths of history that were covered in like 1 or 2 lines, you know, with each whereas statement that was listed. A whole boarding school era, right? Or Wounded Knee, or broken treaties, you know, Sand Creek, massacres and so on. Just like that, boom, 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 you know, and I felt like I sat there and said, okay, oh goodness, you're apologizing for all of it, right? Wow. But what I felt that was missing was detail and the specifics of what it really is to be a Native person living now, right now. A woman, a Native woman living now, a mother. And so that was what I felt was important in this response. That was my aim, was to paint in some of the detail to that. Because I feel like it's too easy, when the picture is too big, it's almost easy to overlook, if you can imagine, right? But it was, therefore I felt my goal to add some detail to that. And that's also why I tried very hard to contain my poems, except for 38, which is not in the whereas section, but I wanted all of them to take place within living memory. So within my lifetime or my father's lifetime, yeah.
So you have said that this work is not defined by resistance, but I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but that it's about a place of belonging. So when I think about that, it seems to me it is an attempt then to, which goes along with what you just said, an attempt to open out the documents and the memory so that individuals can sort of climb in there. And because you've also said that one of the things that disturbed you about Obama's signing was that he did it on a Saturday with no one present, and that it was months before it was taken to the public. And then when it was taken to the public, only 5 tribal leaders were included out of over 520 tribes in the country. And so that sense that it becomes like a wash was what was upsetting?
Well, yeah, I mean, basically it was that there was, no sort of public reception and hearing for that. And that, yeah, I don't want to restate what you've said, but just that there were no tribal leaders invited to even witness the signing and, be present. And I think that this is something that we were sort of talking about before, that was also important to me from the very first poem that starts that section, which is the idea, the necessity I feel of physical presence. Always, here we are in our bodies, and to share space with each other. And it is not just to read an apology, but to read each other. I think that makes these kinds of gestures so important. And I think maybe that's something that I was talking to you about before, in some ways that I feel such a kinship with you in our work sometimes. Like, I really hear you, I feel what you're saying. Can I reflect back to you and quote some of your work? I think that's more fun than just talking about myself.
But I just want to say this one thing.
Yeah.
But
no.
No. Just this one thing. But the piece that you read, that you began with, the apology that comes from the Father that lives in a centuries of sorry, is that possible beyond the intimate relationship? I mean, is the failure of the public document, is failure written into gestures like that?
I don't think so. Because I think of a very, just immediately I called to mind a very powerful moment I remembered from Standing Rock. Oh, where's Nick Estes here? Or I need someone to help me. I remembered the apology. Do any of you who were following the doings at Standing Rock, if you might remember the moment when the veterans came to join what was happening, and they had a gathering there where the veterans themselves apologized to the people of Standing Rock for some of the things that happened through U.S. military. And I remember seeing images from that and some video, and I remember at the time just crying and crying. And these veterans, all of them took a knee, and they got on their knee in front of the community. That was the most beautiful moment. I never imagined that possible, that kind of thing, to ever happen, you know. But at least for me, it was very moving. And so I think it is possible outside of just the one-on-one personal gesture.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so, do I get to quote you now? Because
You can do whatever you want.
Thank you. I think because, as I was saying, I think that in your work, so many times I do feel a kinship or a relationship to you in the way that you are thinking and mulling through some of these things, as you said, that have to do with structure but also the interpersonal relationship, which I understand as being a bodily and physical encounter as well, right? And I have really been thinking about this. If I can read it, can I read from Citizen? Well, I'm gonna do it. So, here we go, and I just think it's so beautiful. Here we go, page 117. Arguably, there is no simultaneity, between the English sky and the body being ordered to rest in peace. This difference, which has to do with, quote, the war the black body's presence has occasioned, end quote, to quote Baldwin, makes all the difference. One could become acquainted with the inflammation that existed around Dugan's body, and it would be uncomfortable. This was the line that was very important to me. You wrote, grief comes out of relationships to subjects over time, and not to any subject in theory. You tell the English sky to give him an out. And then, you end this passage with, apparently your friend won't write about Mark Dugan. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Or the London riots. Still, you continue searching his space because there is something to find, an answer to question. And I don't know, this was so important to me. You know, this idea that still in the end we are searching each other's faces. We're still trying to find the answers in each other, right? In that presence, that energy there. And that is the magic elixir, I think.
Well, or the hope.
The hope.
The hope. I don't know about the magic, but the hope. I do think that I think like you, I understand the depth and the vastness of failure, the bloodiness of it, the possibility of both the failure of the past, but the continued failure in the present. And so I do feel like we turn to each other for the corrective. And when the other fails you, consistent with the structure, it is somehow even more devastating, because you feel as if, I shouldn't say you, I feel as if I thought we were walking here together. I thought we were existing in this land together with the same history. I didn't realize. And so I agree with you that when one sees in the other's face a kind of recognition, what you call curative voicing, I think we're grateful for it, because it allows us to be less alone. You know, and I feel like a book like Whereas is sort of like a hand holding. It is someone who is, it's someone you're sitting right here. But it in itself becomes the gesture of reaching out and pulling us in together without having to deny the history. That's the piece that I think is important to me and that I find in your work. That we don't deny the history, but despite the history, or because of the history, we happen to understand the importance of what it means for the person across the table to say, I'm sorry. Yeah. I mean, that phrase, centuries and sorry, I love that phrase. It's one of those phrases that stays with me. And, you know, I'm listening to the television and somebody says something and I think centuries and sorry.
Can I talk to you about something I'm curious about? Sure. Okay. Because I love it, and it's something that I'm still trying to understand myself. You have this page here, you're talking about what makes language hurtful. Where Judith Butler says, our very being exposes us to the address of another, she answers when she's asked about what makes language hurtful. We suffer from the condition of being addressable. Our emotional openness, she adds, is carried by addressability. Language navigates this. What I'm most interested in this page, though, is after considering Butler's remarks, you begin to understand yourself as rendered hyper-visible in the face of such language acts. Language that feels hurtful is intended to exploit all the ways that you are present, rather than as a means to denigrate or erase you as a person. I'm still struggling to understand that completely, because maybe in some ways I'm still in the place where I think that certain language and hurtful language is intended to erase us. And so I'm wondering what that hypervisibility is about.
Well, that would take me to the 38. You know, that phrase in that piece is, let them eat grass. And that sense that I recognize that you're there. And I am willing to starve you. I am willing to genocide you. That is both an act of erasure, but you're hypervisible inside the imagination of the person who's willing to do that.
That's right.
That, you know, that is huge presence.
Yes.
Answered by huge reaction.
Right.
Let them eat grass.
Yes.
And so to me, those moments are similar moments. Can you read that, the end of that piece?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
You don't know what you're getting into when you ask me to read something, because I read slowly. Maybe I'll just read the last, I think maybe the last page. Okay. This is from 38. When the Dakota people were starving, As you may remember, government traders would not extend store credit to, quote, Indians. One trader named Andrew Myrick is famous for his refusal to provide credit to Dakota people by saying, quote, if they are hungry, let them eat grass. There are variations of Myrick's words, but they are all something to that effect. When settlers and traders were killed during the Sioux Uprising, one of the first to be executed by the Dakota was Andrew Myrick. When Myrick's body was found, his mouth was stuffed with grass. I am inclined to call this act by the Dakota warriors a poem. There's irony in their poem. There was no text. Real poems do not really require words. I have italicized the previous sentence to indicate inner dialogue, a revealing moment. But on second thought, the words, let them eat grass, click the gears of the poem into place. So we could also say language and word choice are crucial to the poem's work. Things are circling back again. Sometimes, when in a circle, if I wish to exit, I must leap. And let the body swing from the platform out to the grasses.
Isn't that incredible? That final image is one I was meditating on for a while because it, for me, is also a moment that becomes a kind of, it's both a moment of exhilaration and a moment of murder, like that swinging body out to the grasses. And so I began to think about how the land in Whereas functions like the Atlantic Ocean in much of the work of African Americans, that the ocean holds the passage into both physical death and for centuries of psychic killing, so that once we arrive in this country, we are never fully alive in a way. And so I was wondering how you would talk about the land. I mean, I know the grasses are all over Whereas and the land, but sort of in your own imaginative or actual relationship to both the history and the land, how do you think about it?
Well, I've talked about this 4, so I don't want to repeat myself too much. So I will add.
Repeat.
Yeah. Oh, repeat. Okay. Okay. So with regard to land, and let's say with this particular body of work, like with Whereas, I opened the book with the piece Kassapa. And Kassapa is a reference to the area of land, the Black Hills in South Dakota. If you don't know anything about the Black Hills, Google it tonight. You will find out something very interesting with regard to our treaty, our treaties, the breaking of that treaty, and some of the circumstances around that land. But that is, in essence, the place of our origin as we understand it for Lakota people. So we understand ourselves as coming from that particular place. And so that's how, and that's why I opened the book with a piece that was sort of meditating on that place of origin. And so then, of course, you see throughout the book this thread of grasses. And in fact, even I say it point blank in the poem 38 that I wanted to write about grass. That's why I started that piece, you know. I was interested in the grass of the northern plains has always been, it's the smell, it's the sight of it that always, when I'm driving and going up north, I live in Santa Fe, and when I go up north, as soon as I'm with the grass, then I know I'm getting close to home. And that is, it's always the first thing that grounds me, you know, to home. But I think it's also, isn't this interesting, as you were talking about the ocean for you, it's actually the waves in the grass, the movement of the grass, just visually that I connected to water, that there's this something to be said in that movement that exists, you know, in the land, in the grass there up north. But I think that, well, I just think that it was important to, especially this body, that keeping that relationship to land, because that really is a big part of who we are as Lakota people. You know, our beliefs, our language, and everything within it, it is inseparable from the land. So I just felt like that was important to the work.
But also in the sense that the land was taken.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And the land was, and one's marginalized boundaries in terms of where one can be on the land. I mean, there's so much inside the history.
And that's really the heart of the conflict as well, right? I mean, it's all about land. Yeah. It's not because you don't like me as a person.
Yeah, it's all about land.
Right, or you didn't like us, like our personalities, right? It's about the land. So yes, that is really at the heart of everything. Yeah.
Exactly. I am charged with turning this into a public Q&A. So watch me do it. So we are about to take questions. Begin to think of them. And I'm going to end on this last one. What are you working on now?
I am working on a book. I was just talking to a friend earlier today. Oh, this would be another great conversation for you and I, but anyway. So I am working on a collection of, on some work. A majority of that work is collaborative poems and pieces and visual work. The title, the working title right now, I'm pretty sure it'll be the title, is We, which I was talking with a friend earlier today about that, because if you add an accent mark over the E, then it becomes we, and in Lakota language, that means blood. And so it's also something that's quite a new direction from Whereas, not just because of the content of the poems, but because I'm using the pronoun we, which I purposely avoided in Whereas. So I was very conscious of using the first person, which is something that I was hoping we could have talked about too. It's very interesting reading your work and your discussion of that. But yeah, that's what I'm working on.
Okay, thank you. Ready? Is something happening? Oh, I see someone is approaching. Hello.
Hello,
I
thank
know
you both. I'm Kenyon Adams from the Louis Armstrong House Museum and Archives. Thank you. You've both given us this sort of capacious, imaginative sense of land and body, and I think it's a kind of space that I found myself really arriving in the last couple of minutes. So I think my question has changed, but I want to pose it in that imaginative sense that you've kind of allowed me to have now. We talk about a distinction, perhaps, between memory and history that you have observed or discovered in your work. Is it for you both a bodied distinctive, and does it also relate to land in a sense? And then what kinds of new relationships does whiteness propose to the body? How does it also relate to memory?
I came to hear you.
Oh my goodness, here we go. Okay. I'll be honest, I think that whiteness is, it is indeed something I think about, but I think that more often my concerns from Native perspective, and even in the poems within Whereas, are so often more about the nationhood of Native people. So it is to understand us, and we understand ourselves as having each of our peoples as having our own nations. And so I'm not always so much concerned with a whiteness, but an Americanness, and an American amnesia, and an American gaze, and an American lack of knowledge, a lack of education, and a lack of history. I was recently on a panel. Oh, that was terrible. I created a scene I don't know, it was one of those days. So, poor thing, this writer on the panel was wondering out loud what this land in our region was like, you know, way back when, whatever that meant to him. And so in his body of work, he went as far as going to the time of the conquistadors, the Spanish entry into the southwestern region, New Mexico region. Oh my gosh, I lost it, right? Because history predate the knowledge and the peoples there, have been there for thousands and thousands of years, right? And so to assume that history began with any conqueror, whether they're Spanish or the European settlers, is just, that's an American kind of amnesia, And so that is a lot of what I'm thinking about. And also our, and along with that, to understand that Native peoples are not just one people, so there's a kind of diversity in nations within this great United States. So those are more the things that I'm often thinking about. Yeah.
I rarely think about whiteness. That's a joke. But in terms of history, I have to disagree with you a little bit in the sense that I think that many of us have spent a lot of time trying to open up the idea of Americanness so that it can include a script other than one that is prescribed by those who call themselves white. That their concerns, their needs, their sense of ownership has thrown so many of us into a dynamic where we have spent a lot of centuries, not hours, not seconds, not days, but centuries fighting to revise that term American. And so I don't think I can invoke memory and not invoke those who have managed quite successfully to genocide people in the name of America. And so I hear what you're saying, that the history is larger and bigger and longer, and the memory is longer than that point of origin. But how we get to be here now, why Whereas has to be written, why Obama needs to create a document that apologizes, has to do with the actual actions of a government that that valued some people and not others. And and so the unstitching, those counter narratives that have been put out, those moments of redress have all been in service of opening out this idea of what American means. So that's the position from which I stand. Another question approaches.
Hi. To be honest, I haven't had the pleasure of reading your works. I've only read bits and pieces, so if you've answered this before, I apologize for asking again. So my question has to do with being writers and having to navigate double consciousness. And in creating your works in English, which is a language that was forced upon a lot of people of the diaspora and native peoples, how do you navigate that in your writing when you discuss word choice and expressing yourself in a language that is technically not your own?
Well, English is, I grew up, I was born in a British colony. English might technically not be my language, but it is the only language I've known. So I think my relationship as a writer to that language is really about opening up each and every word, even the pronouns, prepositions, in terms of how they exist in relation to me. Whether or not I am allowed inside that word, am I allowed inside that pronoun? Does that pronoun include me in any way that I recognize? You know, so I think I'm not in that same relationship that you are.
Well, still, English is my first language, so it's the language that I'm most comfortable in writing with. At the same time, right? At the same time, I do, as you may already know, work with Lakota language, some in my work. And my relationship to language evolves, both English language and Lakota language. So, for example, I'm at a place right now where I look, and I don't mean to, be self-deprecating or diminish the the value of my previous work, but still, I'm in a position where I'm looking back on some of the pieces where I've taken 1 or 2 or 3 Lakota words or phrases, and I look at them on the page, surrounded by English text, and I don't feel good about that anymore. Even visually, to look at what I'm doing to our language, just visually speaking, it says volumes. And I am questioning, why am I doing this? Why am I repeating this cycle visually, of isolating and separating? And it's almost, I almost pity those little words on the page. They're all by themselves in the spotlight. And so I have actually begun trying to write poems, 100 very simple, tiny poems, 100% in Lakota language. And it's been a really beautiful process. I feel like a child, and I love that. I feel like I'm discovering language and using it as a child would, which is also filled with surprise. So that's the one exciting thing. The other thing that I'm learning is that I cannot use Lakota language. I cannot write poems the way I would in English. You can't. You have to think in Lakota. You have to understand how nouns are used, for example. Well, I could go on and on all night, but in a nutshell, I am growing and changing all the time in my relationship to both English and Lakota languages and how I use them. Yeah.
Do you ever dream in Lakota?
No,
No?
I don't. I mean, English is, yeah. And I'm a learner of Lakota language.
Let them pass.
Hi, so my name is Kevin, and I'm a freshman in high school, and my English teacher gave me the opportunity to talk about Citizen, your book, and I've had the pleasure of reading it, and I didn't get to read Whereas yet, but I'm looking forward to it, and I guess my
It'll be a treat.
I'm sure it will, yeah. My question, I guess, is how do we create spaces where we can educate people, I feel like more white people, about whiteness without creating an aggressive atmosphere, I guess. I find that talking about things like whiteness in that connotation and talking about injustices faced by oppressed minorities to be sort of a taboo subject in schools, at least in my school. And I feel like we don't really have a space to talk about things like that. And I feel like this conversation that you guys are having right now is such a incredible moment and a learning moment. And I feel like that isn't really being broadcasted to enough students and enough people like me. And I feel like for me and myself, I try to find places like this, and I try to educate myself as best as I can about things like that. And I feel like I'm not really sure how we can create that as a more mainstream thing. And I was wondering if you have any insight on that.
If I were you, when I was your age, my God, my God, my God. That is the question. I mean, it's a question not just in high school. It's the question on Wall Street. It's the question at universities. It's the question in hospitals. It's the question everywhere. How do we begin the conversations that allow white people to understand that their investments have been at the cost of everybody else? How do we do it? In my own case, I am one of the co-founders of the Racial Imaginary Institute. And it has a very neutral name, the Racial Imaginary Institute, so you could go to school and say, can we talk about the Racial Imaginary Institute? And our first issue is dedicated to whiteness. And we have a website that showcases the work of artists and writers, some of them in this audience. Charlotte Lagarde has a whole series of works that she did on colonial white, looking just at the names of paint, white paint that you put on your house. And you can go and buy colonial white. Why you would want to? You know, so there's a book by Robin DiAngelo called White Fragility that I think you could also introduce into your discussions at school. And there are, you know, tons more work out there. You could start a film series where you show films that address this issue, and you know, and so I think there are lots of ways to go about it. But it is the central question. It is incredible that even in a room like this, where we have people who have spent so much time educating themselves, getting degrees, becoming amazing writers and thinkers and readers and doctors, they have managed to skirt around this issue of whiteness. in order to stay complicit with its advantages. So what I have to say to you is thank you. Thank you for already knowing that there is no question that doesn't include that question. Thank you. The question is, how is climate change being addressed and focused on in the work now? Yes? Yes. Well, I believe in the science on both sides of climate change. I give it a lot of thought. It's funny because in my own work, I haven't written explicitly about that, but I do teach, and I teach Juliana Sparr's work because I think what she has done in terms of creating a landscape that exhibits its own damage in its way, and our complicity in that damage has been incredible. I also teach the work of Bernetsky, the photographer. I don't know if you know his work. He has gone around the world photographing the places where our electronic wastes end up. And so those ways in which we, by being modern, by using all the technology that we use, are very slowly both poisoning other people and dumping it in other people's backyard. And so, and every day we are experiencing the effects of that. I think about why it doesn't show up in my work. Who's the Canadian writer? What's her name? Yeah, Naomi Klein. I read this great piece. Thank you. That's Adam Fitzgerald. I read this great piece where she talked about how the reason why countries like the United States and Europe can put off climate change is because the worst devastation is really hitting countries that don't have a voice, that are, so the tsunamis hit in a place that is not of concern for CNN. I mean, we hear about it, but it doesn't matter. And in our countries, it's getting a little warmer, and everybody thinks that means they don't have to go to the Caribbean. I mean, it's a simple, it's simplified, but you can see the logic inside of it. That until the devastation actually gets here, that's when we're going to look. And then, of course, it's too late, if it's not already too late.
Hi, can you both speak about how you've overcome as writers obstacles that you may have faced with people, the reception of your work, especially in the white world that we live in?
Mm-hmm. Okay. You know, I was actually still thinking about the climate change question. Should I do 1, 2? Okay. All right. Actually, I was thinking about the climate change question because some of the more recent work that I've done and we were talking about this earlier, it's kind of a shift in my gaze, my own positioning. I'm less concerned with holding up a mirror to congressional document or to Americanness, as I refer to it, or what have you. But I'm been more interested in work within the Lakota community and some of our working with our language and some of our beliefs and so forth. So one of those, I did a series of poems that had to do with relations and Lakota idea of relationship and relations and relatives. And part of that means understanding our relatives as beyond just human relatives. And I mean that with all seriousness, and to understand the world around us as being part of our family, to treat the world around us as you would a relative. And so, but all of that kind of understanding came from various people in our community that we interviewed. I was part of a show, an exhibit with other Lakota artists. So it was kind of a collaborative work. And so that may not be directly addressing climate change itself, but it's more of a sense of values and a way of seeing the world. I think that could create change and how we treat the world. The second one, 1, 2, the second one was obstacles we've faced.
As writers.
Pardon me?
Obstacles you faced in bringing your work to the world.
I'm going to let you answer that until I...
Okay, sure. So, you know, one of the gifts that I have been given in my life are my friends. I have some incredible friends, and one of them is the critic, theorist, affect theorist Lauren Ballant. And the fact that we're such good friends means I can get on the phone and say, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And so in answer to this question, it's always interesting to me as a Black writer, like I don't know sometimes how to take criticism. I mean, I can take criticism, I like criticism, but I don't know if the criticism comes from a white person. It's hard to know what it involves. So, you know, when I'm working on something, all I care about is the thing being good. If you told me the way to make it good is not to sleep for 525 days, I would try that. So I call Lauren and I'm like, Lauren, should I do this thing that's recommended? Is this a good thing? Or is this coming from a defensive and defended place of whiteness? And in that conversation came a paper that she wrote on likability. She wrote this, and I find this paper incredibly useful to thinking about what it means to bring work written by a Black person into the world, especially when the people who are judges, the people who are the reviewers, the people who are the editors are all white. So when they say it's a crap of shit, is it a crap of shit? Or is it not a work that works inside their narrative of what should happen? And so Lauren wrote this piece about likability, which talks about the fact that for people of color, there is the burden of creating a thing where white people feel they are liked inside the thing. And once they feel they're liked inside the thing, they can then exist with the thing. If the thing critiques them in a way that they don't like, the thing is bad. The thing sucks. The person has no imaginative possibilities. And this shows itself to me in many ways. I was just recently on a secret panel, so I can't really say anything, but it was secret. But inside that room, there was a thing that came up. And the thing came up and someone said, well, this thing is nothing because the archives cannot support this thing. And so then I said, and the only reason I was able to say this is because of Saidiya Hartman and her work. And I said, but if the archives were created by white people who didn't believe these other people existed and didn't do any work to document or save or hold on to anything that they produced, how can we use the existence or non-existence of the archive as a way to judge X thing? So that's what I mean. First you erase the person, and then you turn around and say, because there's nothing there, it's not a valid topic. So there are all these sort of insidious ways that whiteness comes to the, and you're like, wait, hold up. You just changed the rules. So that's something that I've been thinking about. Like, what does it mean to make work that critiques the people who are the people that allow the work to be in the world? How does that work?
Yes. Oh. You just made me think of a poem, actually. Well, I can't read the whole thing because all my poems are super long. Oh, okay. This was, what you made me think of was this way of critiquing those who make it possible for your work to be in the world, right? And so you made me think of a poem I wrote titled Diction. And this poem, it's super long, it's like 9 pages long, which is typical of a lot of the pieces in here. But this was in response to a critique I received that I needed to work on my diction. And so I worked on a 9-page poem called Diction. I took that critique literally, and I did that for a whole summer. I'll just read maybe the first 2 sections. Diction. Grind the nose into a mirror. Flatten the head. Eye to eye to eye. Am a door to a room I smear to enter. fog from the mouth as diction. I understand, yes, I intuit aken, a style of speaking or writing depend, ent upon choice or words and accent, inflecti on speech sound quality. I cogitate, I tune up to terms of veiling, stand, ards, accept, ability, enunciation.
Thank you all. The question and answer period has been closed.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll keep it very short. My name is Clarice Rosa Sharif, and I'm the Director of Public Programs at PEN America. Thank you so much for coming tonight. I have to share with you and with you that my colleague and I dreamt about this evening for a whole year. We've been waiting for a whole year to actually make this happen and bring it to life. So I thank you, Layli, thank you, Claudia, for doing us the honor of sharing everything. And I think it's a Friday night, we're in New York City, and of course I ran like a mad woman here because I was running late, and I got here and I was reminded that we can sometimes just pause, listen, be here, be together, look at each other's faces, and I'm so glad that we got a chance to do that tonight. So I'll thank our partners quickly. The Stein Bookstore, we're doing this Pen Out Loud series with them 2 more times in the spring, and they're a terrific partner. Books are on sales outside in the lobby. The New School, thank you for hosting us tonight. The Academy of American Poets, thank you for partnering on this special evening with us. And for one last time, Gregory Partlow, Layli Long Soldier, Claudia Rankine, thank you very much.